Hello, this is Dave Sugarbaker, and today is the first Sunday in June, and I have a very brief clip of the letter of Paul to the Ephesians, and he says this: Put away from you all bitterness and wrath and anger and wrangling and slander, together with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ has forgiven you. A newscaster was wrapping up the evening news at 6 o'clock, and it had been a particularly grim news day with lots of outrageous statements from politicians and also singularly dumb acts by some local populace. The newscaster wrapped up the news segment by saying, "Well, folks, that's the news. Be careful out there. There's a 50% chance of rain tomorrow, and the level of relative stupidity remains at 99%. I read an opinion piece this last week that described our current climate as dominated by fear, anger, and cruelty. If that's true, I worry about young people growing up in a world dominated by things like fear and anger and cruelty. It seems to me that the most they could hope for would be to survive and protect themselves. But it would be a grim world indeed. Fortunately, I'm not seeing that in my campers at Camp Discovery. They're not responding to a world of fear and anger and cruelty. They're just busy enjoying themselves. One camper in our 200 square foot sandbox was busy packaging sand in various containers and selling it as pretend ice cream. She had amazing flavors that she was selling. She claimed to have sold several packets of this ice cream, and the going price was $50. She was having a ball. Other campers had captured crawdads in the creek that runs parallel to the Beechwood Park, and several of these new crawdad pets had already been assigned names. The odds are, though, that unless something changes, today's young people will learn from the adults in their lives to live lives of grievance. They will learn to divide people into us and them. They will learn that outsiders are to be blamed for whatever they want and don't have. They will learn to use all or nothing reasoning to sort out people into convenient groups and put negative labels on those groups. I kind of agree with the newscaster on the 6 o'clock news. It's going to be a scary world out there unless we do something to change it. I used to tell my wedding couples that it was a really good thing that they were not marrying their clone. The other person that they were going to marry here would be different in many, many ways, and that would be either their greatest strength or their biggest fight. It was their choice which way they wanted to handle difference. Generally, we seem to be doing a pretty bad job at handling difference at this moment in time. There's conservative and progressive, there's urban and rural, there's pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel, there's isolationists versus pro-Ukrainians, there's straight versus LGBTQ, there's pro-life and there's pro-choice, not to mention flat earthers. And we all retreat into our separate camps, and we demonize those who differ. We're afraid of difference. It threatens our perception of right and wrong, the validity of our perception of the world. And when we're fearful, we get mad at those who make us afraid. And when we get mad, our anger justifies what we do and say as we defend ourselves from personal attack. And that can lead to doing and saying things that are cruel. How are we going to make our way through this constructively? Is fear, anger, and cruelty an inevitable destination? There are enough people in this world to account for lots of differing perspectives and opinions. What's the likelihood that everybody's going to see the light and decide to see and do things the way I do? It's pretty clear that we live with others who don't agree with us, and difference may very well be a fact of life. So how do we get along? Paul writes to the church at Ephesus, asking them to put away from you all bitterness and wrath and anger and wrangling and slander, together with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ has forgiven you. I think it's interesting to notice that Paul doesn't ask them to somehow get together and agree on everything. In fact, we are unique, distinct, individual human beings, and it means that we're not going to agree on everything. Here comes my cat. Can you see this cat down here? She's wanting to get in on the recording. Anyway, Paul doesn't ask us to agree, but he does ask us, or he asked those people at Ephesus, to put away bitterness and wrath and anger and wrangling, and to be tender-hearted and forgiving with one another. So how do we do that? It doesn't, I got to get rid of the cat here. Okay, there you go. Okay. So how do we go about dealing with difference? The answer is not going to arise from politics, and it's not going to come from our innate disposition. It comes from seeing others as a child of God, just as we are, even if they don't think or love or act just like we do. We have to be ready to say to these people who we look at and see as another child of God. Just because they're different doesn't make them demonizing material. So we have our spiritual siblings who don't agree with us. What we have to be able to do is to say to these others who do not agree, I want to understand why you believe and think and act as you do. I may not be able to adopt your ways, but I want to appreciate where you're coming from. I want to respect and understand, even though I don't agree. I want to tell you also where I have been and why I believe and think and act as I do. I don't want you to adopt my point of view because you haven't had my life experience. And I, in turn, can't perceive or respond to the world as you do because I have not lived your life. But let's find out what we do share. Let's find points of agreement, even though we will have our differences. This may not work. Now, having this kind of open and approaching kind of dialogue may not work if we're dealing with somebody who sees understanding as a sign of weakness. But we can't make others get off the fear and anger train if they don't want to get off. It's their choice. But fear, anger, and cruelty can consume our energy and our time. And we can choose not to allow it to permeate us. We can do better. What was it that John Wesley said about 150 years ago? Though we may not think alike, may we not love alike? And that's what I have to say this week. God bless you. Take care. See you soon.